1970s, Japan was quietly rewriting the rulebook. While the rest of the world was busy flaunting muscle cars with chrome badges and roaring V8s, something stealthier was brewing in the suburbs of Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya. Mild-looking sedans, family cars, the kind of vehicles that looked like they belonged in PTA meetings or outside small corner shops. But these weren't your typical grocery getters. Beneath their modest sheet metal hid engines and setups that could embarrass the very muscle machines that ruled the highways. This was the decade of the Japanese sleeper, cars so ordinary they became invisible until the moment they left something far more powerful choking in their wake. Today we're turning back the clock and lifting the hoods on 12 forgotten legends, 12 unknown Japanese family sleepers from the 1970s that were secretly street racers. So settle in, grab a drink, and let's uncover the quiet killers that turned polite suburbia into a secret battleground. 12. 1976. Mazda 616, the suburban assassin. At first glance, the 1976 Mazda 616 looked like the definition of plain. Square lines, polite proportions, and the demeanor of a teacher's car parked neatly outside a small suburban house. It was the kind of car that came with a radio that only played AM and an owner who still used a rotary phone. Under the hood, a 1.6-litre inline-4 pushing a modest 75 horsepower. Nothing about that screamed excitement. It was the car you drove to the grocery store, not to the track. But here's where things get interesting. The 616 shared its bones with Mazda's rotary legends, the RX series, and that meant opportunity. Clever owners realized that with a little wrenching and a lot of curiosity, they could swap in Mazda's 13B rotary engine. Suddenly, this mild-mannered family sedan had 130 horsepower and a red line past 7,000 RPM. Imagine pulling up to a light next to a Camaro or a Mustang, only for this beige box to take off screaming like a swarm of angry bees. That's what made the 616 dangerous. It didn't look fast, it looked forgettable. But when tuned right, it hit 0 to 60 in under 8 seconds and could dance through corners thanks to its lightweight chassis. Sure, it had its flaws, fragile apex seals, spotty reliability, and a thirst that rivaled muscle cars twice its size. But for those in the know, it was worth every headache. This was the car that showed Japan could play dirty without looking the part. 11. 1975 Toyota Mark II X30, the manager with a mean streak. Next up, the 1975 Toyota Mark II X30, a car that looked like it belonged to a senior manager on his way to a business lunch. Chrome trim, pressed suit proportions, and an air of quiet authority. It was calm, composed, and every bit the executive sedan. But this particular Mark II had a secret under that polished exterior. While most rolled out with a gentle 1.8-litre single-cam motor, Toyota quietly offered a version with something special, the 18RG twin-cam engine. Co-developed with Yamaha, it featured twin carbs and high compression, producing around 130 horsepower and 115 pound-feet of torque. Now that doesn't sound monstrous, but paired with a 5-speed manual and a surprisingly eager chassis, it transformed the Mark II into a completely different animal. On paper, it could hit 0 to 60 in just over 9 seconds, but in spirit, it felt much quicker. The power delivery was smooth, almost musical, the kind that made you find excuses to downshift. Outside, it stayed discreet. No spoilers, no flares, no noise. Just a clean sedan that could cruise through traffic unnoticed, then tear up mountain switchbacks on weekends. That's the kind of duality only Japan could pull off. Business on the outside, pure mischief underneath. Of course, the suspension showed its age when pushed too hard, and that twin cam demanded constant tuning. But that was part of the charm. It wasn't just a car. It was a secret handshake among enthusiasts. 10. 1977. Nissan Violet 160J SSS, the grocery getter with grit. Blink, and you'd miss it. The 1977 Nissan Violet looked like every other commuter car parked outside a supermarket. Boxy body, chrome bumpers, and the kind of car that blended into the crowd without even trying. But the SSS badge, standing for Super Sports Sedan, hinted that this one wasn't playing by the same rules. Underneath the unassuming exterior sat a tuned L16 inline-4, producing about 110 horsepower, paired with a 5-speed manual and rear-wheel drive. Doesn't sound like much? Well, the car barely tipped the scales at under 1,000 kilograms. That power-to-weight ratio made it far quicker than its look suggested. What really set the Violet apart, though, was its independent rear suspension, rare for sedans of its class back then. It gave it the kind of agility that let it carve corners far beyond what its badge implied. Street racers took notice. Instead of dumping money into flashy Z-cars or Celicas, some quietly built Violets that could tear through back roads while still looking like they were late for a parent-teacher conference. Its only weakness? Rust. Many of these humble beasts didn't survive the years, but the ones that did, they're underground treasures now, whispered about by old-school tuners who remember how this boring car could ruin reputations. 1975, Mitsubishi Galant Sigma, A120, the typewriter assassin. In 1975, the Mitsubishi Galant Sigma A120 rolled onto the scene like an accountant's dream. Square, serious, and so reserved, it could have been mistaken for wallpaper on wheels. But give it the right heart transplant, and it turned into a completely different creature. Most Sigmas came with gentle Astron engines, reliable, quiet, and painfully polite. But gearheads back then had a trick. They pulled a GSR engine from the more aggressive Lancer or Galant GTO trims. That 2.0-litre Astron GSR could make up to 125 horsepower and equal torque, which doesn't sound earth-shattering until you realize this car was never built for speed to begin with. Once that swap was done, the Sigma's true potential came alive. 0 to 60 in around 8.5 seconds, and a punchy mid-range that could catch much faster cars off guard. It wasn't just quick, it was unpredictable. You'd see that squared sedan and never suspect the storm hiding behind the grille. Sure, without suspension upgrades, it felt soft through corners, but in a straight line. Trouble. This was the kind of car that looked like it belonged to your uncle who paid bills in person, until it blew past you on the expressway. That's the thing about the Sigma A120. It didn't need to be loud to make a point. It let the shocked faces in the rearview mirror do all the talking. 8. 1972 Isuzu Bellet 1800 GTN, the Gentleman Brawler. Now here's a name that too many people have forgotten. The 1972 Isuzu Bellet 1800 GTN. Modest, refined, maybe even a bit old-fashioned. But peel back that tidy silhouette, and what you had was Japan's first true performance sedan, hiding in plain sight. The Bellet had already made waves in motorsport circles during the 60s, earning its stripes in rallies and touring car events. By 1972, the 1800 GTN took that DNA and wrapped it in a family-friendly package. Under the hood, the G180W inline-4 pushed out 115 horsepower and equal torque, respectable numbers for a car that weighed just over 2,200 pounds. That lightness made it brisk, hitting 0 to 60 in under 9 seconds. But numbers alone don't tell the story. The Bellet had balance, it had poise. It was a driver's car disguised as a delivery vehicle. Rear-wheel drive, a close ratio 5-speed, and sport suspension meant it could dance through corners with ease. Inside, it was all business. No frills, no flair, just function. The kind of car that didn't need to scream to be heard. Sure, parts support was thin even back then, and the ride could be punishing. But for those lucky enough to own one, the Bellet was proof that true performance didn't need showmanship. Just confidence, and a driver who knew what they had. 7. 1978. Daihatsu Charmant 2TG, the office clerk turned street threat. The Daihatsu Charmant might be the most ironic name on this list. It sounds gentle, polite, the kind of car your uncle would drive to work and forget to lock. And to be fair, most Charmants were exactly that, mild, forgettable, and built purely for practicality. But when tuners started dropping in Toyota's 2TG twin-cam engine, everything changed. Borrowed from the Celica and Corolla Levin, This 1.6-litre twin-cam screamer made over 120 horsepower and loved to rev. Suddenly, that same polite sedan became a mid-8-second 0 to 60 sleeper. The sound alone was enough to give away its transformation, that high-revving wail that seemed to mock everything else on the road. The best part? It shared its platform with the Toyota K70, which meant parts compatibility was surprisingly friendly. Swaps were easy, tuning was straightforward, and the results were devastating. Still, it never lost its disguise. Boxy, neutral colors, no spoilers, just a rolling tax form with a secret. That's what made it so much fun. It wasn't supposed to be fast, and that's exactly why it was. 6. 1971. Mazda Loose R130, the Rotary Gentleman. Elegant, European, sophisticated. That was the image Mazda wanted for the Loose R130. Designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro, it looked like something parked outside an embassy, not a racetrack. Long hood, clean lines, and a quiet presence. But under that formality lived chaos. The R130 was the only front-wheel drive rotary car Mazda ever built. Powered by a 13A rotary engine that revved to the heavens. 110 horsepower, 115 pound-feet of torque, and a red line that refused to quit. It wasn't about brutal acceleration, 0 to 60 in around 10 seconds, but about how it delivered that power. Smooth, linear, unbroken. The kind of sensation piston engines couldn't replicate. The Loose was misunderstood. Too refined for the street racers, too radical for luxury buyers. Only 976 were ever built. But those who got it knew. This was a rotary wolf wearing Italian tailoring. Quiet, confident, and ready to humiliate anything that mistook politeness for weakness. 5. 1977. Toyota Carina GT-R. A45, the teacher's pet gone rogue. From the outside, the Toyota Carina GT looked about as exciting as a school parking lot. Boxy, beige, perfectly forgettable. But the GT badge told a different story. Under the hood was Toyota's legendary 18RG twin-cam engine, the same DNA that powered the Celica GT. 2 liters, around 130 horsepower, and a rev-happy personality that begged to be driven hard. It wasn't about straight-line power, it was about rhythm. The Carina GT had a stiffer suspension, lighter weight, and a chassis tuned for agility. On winding mountain roads, it didn't just keep up with bigger names, it embarrassed them. This was a car built for drivers who wanted performance without the spotlight. The kind of machine that could sneak out of a high school parking lot and vanish into the hills while the muscle cars were still finding traction. Few Carina GTS survived the years, but the legend remains. A Celica in disguise. A teacher's car with a PhD in rebellion. 4. 1973. Nissan Laurel 2000 SGX, the lounge lizard with bite. Smooth, stylish, respectable. The Nissan Laurel 2000 SGX looked like it belonged to someone who read the business section every morning. Long hood, opera windows, chrome trim. It was more jazz club than drag strip. But hidden beneath the class was performance that no one saw coming. The SGX trim could be optioned with the L20 ET, a fuel-injected straight six making 130 horsepower and matching torque, paired with a 5-speed manual and optional independent rear suspension. The result was balance, stability. A car that could sprint to 60 in around 9 seconds and carve through mountain roads with a grace that defied its luxury image. The Laurel was the definition of subtle power. It didn't roar, it whispered, and by the time others noticed, it was already gone. For those who wanted sophistication with a mean streak, this was the car that let them have both. 3. 1976 Honda Accord CVCC, the Economy Rebel. When the 1976 Honda Accord arrived, it was supposed to be the sensible choice. Fuel efficient, reliable, perfectly average. The kind of car your aunt would buy because it just made sense. But under the hands of tuners, the Accord found a second life. By adding a twin-carb setup borrowed from its sportier Civic siblings, power jumped from a meek 68 horsepower to nearly 100. Pair that with a 5-speed manual and a lightweight 2,000-pound frame, and suddenly this little commuter became a curve-carving menace. 0 to 60 in under 10 seconds might not sound wild, but for a car built during the fuel crisis, it was borderline rebellious. And that's the beauty of it. The Accord didn't try to be fast, it just was. When tuned right, smooth, nimble, and quietly confident, this car proved that even Honda's family cars could pack a punch. 2. 1975 Toyota Crown S80 Super Saloon, the executive enforcer. The 1975 Toyota Crown S80 looked like it belonged in front of a high-end hotel. Polished chrome, plush interior, and an aura of executive calm. But don't let that fool you. Beneath the refinement was a sleeper waiting to stretch its legs. The 2.6-litre inline-six made 123 horsepower and 144 pound-feet of torque. Not staggering, but paired with a manual gearbox and rear-wheel drive, it moved with surprising urgency. 0 to 60 in under 11 seconds was respectable for something that heavy. What made the Crown dangerous, though, was its platform. Tuners realized it shared DNA with Toyota's sportier models. Drop in a 5MGE or later a 1JZ, and suddenly this chauffeur's dream became a full-blown street weapon. From the outside, it still looked dignified, maybe even boring. But once it launched, that illusion shattered fast. The Crown was the definition of elegance hiding fury. 1. 1978 Nissan Cedric 430 Turbo Swap, the ultimate silent killer. Finally, the crown jewel of Japanese sleepers, the 1978 Nissan Cedric 430. A car that looked like it belonged to a retired government official, not a street racer. Boxy, chrome-heavy, completely unassuming. But give it a turbocharged heart, and the story changed instantly. Swapping in a boosted L28 from the Z cars, or later a VG30DET V6, turned this quiet cruiser into a monster. Suddenly it was pushing over 200 horsepower, sometimes more, and capable of humiliating cars that cost twice as much. Even stock, the Cedric had a strong chassis and rear-wheel drive layout that begged for tuning. Modified right, it became Japan's answer to the Q car. A vehicle so calm and composed that no one ever saw it coming. This was the car you'd line up against, laugh at, and then spend the next few seconds watching disappear ahead of you. The ultimate 1970s sleeper, polite, predictable, and utterly devastating. The 1970s were full of loud cars, bold designs, and unapologetic horsepower. But in Japan, something subtler was happening. Engineers and enthusiasts found ways to turn the mundane into the magical, the kind of cars that didn't need stripes or spoilers to prove themselves. From the rotary screamers to twin-cam sedans, each one of these sleepers carried a simple truth. Performance doesn't have to shout to be felt. Sometimes it just needs the right heart, and a driver who understands what's hiding under the hood. So next time you see an old Japanese box parked quietly on the street, take a second look. It might just be one of these forgotten legends, waiting for the light to turn green. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Japan's stealthiest street machines, hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and let's keep the legend of these hidden racers alive. Drop your favorite sleeper from this list in the comments below. Which one would you take for a midnight run? And remember, the loudest cars don't always win. Sometimes the quiet ones strike hardest.